Namaste. So, during our last sessions, we discussed on Chapter 3 of Mediation Act 2023, wherein we discussed about the mediation agreement, pre-litigation mediation, and also we discussed about the power of a court to refer the matters for mediation. Now we'll move on to the next chapter of a Mediation Act 2023, that is Chapter 4, which talks about mediators, wherein we will discuss about the procedure for appointment of mediators and how the mediators, the ethical principle of the mediators, that if there is any conflict of interest, what are the disclosures that are required to be made by the mediators, and also we'll discuss about the procedure for replacement and termination of the mediators in case if there is any conflict of interest. The appointment of mediators is crucial aspect of mediation process, ensuring that the selected mediators is acceptable to all parties involved and possesses the necessary qualification. Section 8 outlines the procedure and criteria for appointing mediators, emphasizing the role of party autonomy and the mediation service provider. So here, Section 8, the general rule for the appointment is that any person, regardless or irrespective of their nationality, can be appointed as a mediator unless otherwise agreed by the parties. The foreign mediators must have qualification, experience, and accreditation. This would ensure that the mediators are competent and recognized for their expertise regardless of their nationality. It also provides that the parties' autonomy, wherein the party themselves are free to agree on a mediator and their appointment process. The parties have the freedom to mutually agree on a mediator, that who shall be appointed as a mediator for resolution of their dispute, and this provision empowers the parties to choose a mediator they trust and are comfortable with, fostering a cooperative environment for the dispute resolution. Further, for the appointment of the mediator, the parties, in case if both of them doesn't agree, or if the parties doesn't mutually agree to appoint a mediator, then the parties initiate the mediation by applying with a mediation service provider for the appointment of the mediator. This ensures the mediation process can proceed even when the parties cannot reach a consensus on the mediator selection, like who shall be a mediator. In case the parties have the right by this section to appoint their own mediator by mutual agreement. In case if they are not mutually consensual, and there are, in that case, the parties also have an autonomy to file an application with the mediation service provider to appoint the mediator. When a party has applied with the mediation service provider for the appointment of a mediator, the provider must appoint a mediator within 7 days, choosing from an agreed mediator or selecting one from the panel of no agreement if reached. That is, the mediation service provider shall appoint or choose an agreed mediator or select one from the panel which is maintained by the service provider. If no agreement is reached or the agreed mediator declines, the mediator from its panel with the mediator. So every mediator appointed by the service provider, there has to be a mediator's consent. And this quick appointments ensures that the 7 days period which has been mandated by section 8 of the Mediation Act ensures that the mediation commences without undue delay. So mediator's consent is also a very important thing in order to resolution of the dispute. The appointed mediator must communicate their willingness to act within 7 days of receiving the appointment notification. This will again ensure that only willing and available mediators are appointed, preventing the unnecessary delays in the mediation process. So this is all about section 8. Now let's move on to section 9 of the Mediation Act. So the section 9 of the Mediation Act talks about preference of the parties. So while appointing a mediator from its panel, the mediation service provider must consider the suitability for specific disputes. Even they should also look after the party's preference, like whether the mediator who shall be appointed, whether he is suitable for such disputes. So say for example, if there is a family matter, family dispute, so the mediator appointed should be expert in a resolution of a family dispute matters. If you appoint any other who is not having expertise, then it would lead to non-settlement. This provision balances the need for the competent mediator with the party's right to have a say in the appointment process, ensuring the mediator is both qualified as well as acceptable to the disputing parties. So the provisions relating to the appointment of a mediator, that is section 8, and section 9, that is preference of the parties, designed to facilitate a smooth and efficient mediation process by emphasizing the parties' autonomy, providing clear procedure for mediator's appointment, and considering both the mediator's qualification and party's preference. These provisions ensures that the mediation process is fair, transparent, and conducive to amicable settlement of a dispute. So with this, we will move on to the next section. It is section 10, which talks about the conflict of interest and disclosure. The integrity and impartiality of a mediator are fundamental to the mediation process. This section outlines the responsibility of a mediators regarding the disclosure of conflict of interest and the rights of the parties to address such conflicts. So, the mediator, before starting the mediation process, a mediator must disclose in writing to the parties any personal, professional, financial, or other circumstances that may constitute a conflict of interest or could give rise to justifiable doubt about the independence or impartiality. This ensures the transparency and allows the parties to make informed decision about the mediator's suitability. If during the mediation, if any new conflict of interest arises or comes to the mediator's attention, the mediator must promptly disclose this in writing to the parties. So, both before starting of a mediation, if there is any conflict, the mediator is required to disclose. Even during the ongoing process of mediation. If it comes to the mind of a mediation that there is a conflict of interest that has arisen, even during that time, the mediator is mandated to promptly disclose such conflict of interest in writing. So continuous disclosure maintains the trust and ensures that any potential bias are promptly addressed. So further, upon disclosure of a conflict of interest by the mediator, the parties can either choose to waive any objection by providing a written consent. This written agreement is taken as a part of consent to continue with the current mediator. Like, if there is any conflict of interest that has been disclosed by the mediator, and in such case, under certain circumstances, if the parties waive off such objection by providing a written consent, then the mediation process will continue. And this provision allows the parties to proceed with the mediation despite potential conflicts. If they unanimously agree that if all the parties unanimously agree that the mediator can remain impartial throughout the mediation process, or even they can obtain the replacement of the mediator, that in case the mediator has disclosed the conflict of interest and if the party does not wish to continue with the mediator after such disclosure, they have the option to replace the mediators. In order to replace the mediation, so we can divide that into two categories, that is replacement of a mediator when it's in case of a institutional mediation, and even we can second category, that is in case if it's a non-institutional mediation. Institutional mediation is something like wherein the service provider will come into picture. That is, the party must apply to the mediation service provider for such termination or for such replacement of a mediator's mandate. And in case of a non-institutional mediation, the party can directly terminate the mediator's mandate. So there is no requirement for the parties to wait in case of non-institutional mediation because the party themselves have appointed the mediator and there is no requirement. So they can directly terminate. But whereas in case of institutional mediation wherein the service provider has appointed the mediator, then in that case it is must that the parties must apply with the mediation service provider. And this process ensures that the parties can maintain the integrity of the mediation process by replacing a mediator whose impartiality is in question. This provision for conflict of interest and disclosure is to uphold the fairness and integrity of the mediation process by requiring the mediators to disclose the potential conflict and providing clear procedure for the parties to address the conflicts. The Act also ensures that the mediation remains a transparent and trustworthy mediation. With this, we move on to the next section, that is Section 11 of the Mediation Act 2023, that is termination of mediator's mandate. The termination of the mediator's mandate is crucial aspect to ensure the integrity and impartiality of the mediation process. This section outlines the condition and procedure under which the mediator's mandate can be terminated by a mediation service provider. So earlier we discussed about the conflict of interest under section 10. That is, in case if there is any conflict of interest and the parties want to change because due to the conflict of interest, the parties want to replace such mediator, under that circumstances, the mediator can be terminated. So in this section, that is section 11, has laid down the grounds for termination of a mediator's mandate. So first ground that has been included is application by the party. The mediation service provider is empowered to terminate a mediator's mandate upon receiving of an application from the party as per section 10 subsection 4 clause 1 of this act. This ensures that the parties have a recourse if they believe the mediator should be replaced. Then they have the power by making an application to the mediation service provider to replace the mediator's mandate. Further, the mediator can also be terminated if any information is received about the mediator's involvement in a conflict of interest, either from the participant or any other person. The mediator will be terminated. This is laid down as a second ground for termination of mediation. The third ground for termination of mediator's mandate is withdrawal of the mediation by the mediator himself. That is, mediator withdraws from the process of mediation for any reasons. So this allows the mediator for voluntary withdrawal without affecting the mediation process. If in case he feels like there is a conflict of interest, even he himself can apply for withdrawal, or for any other reasons, the mediators can himself withdraw from the mediation process. So in case of application by the parties for the termination of the mediator, or if any information that the mediator service provider has received with respect to the mediation that he is involvement in a conflict of interest, so as to terminate the mediator, the due procedure is required to be followed by the mediation service provider. That is, an option should be provided for a mediator to produce his say with respect to the conflict of interest. That is, we call it as hearing the mediator. If termination is sought under clause 2 of this section due to the conflict of interest, the mediator service provider must give the mediator an opportunity to be heard. This ensures the fair process and also follows the principles of natural justice. The mediator service provider must determine if there is a justifiable doubt about the mediator's independence or impartiality. This ensures that the termination is based on a valid concern, and in case if it's a valid concern, the mediator service provider can terminate the mediator's mandate. The decision to terminate must be communicated to the parties, and if either party desires to replace the mediator service provider must proceed accordingly. This provision for the termination of a mediator's mandate ensures the mediation process remains fair, impartial, and transparent. By outlining the clear grounds for termination and the procedure for termination, this provision protects the interest of the parties and maintains the integrity of the mediation process. And this provision is very essential for the parties as well as the mediators to navigate the situations where the mediator's impartiality is in question, and to ensure a smooth transition to a new mediator if necessary. And with this, we will move on to the next section, that is, in case if the mediator is been terminated, how we should replace, or what is the procedure for replacement of a mediator. It is crucially to promptly appoint a replacement to ensure the continuity of a mediation process. And this section outlines the replacing a mediator, distinguishing between the institutional and non-institutional mediation. In case of non-institutional mediation, where the mediator's mandate is terminated, the parties have the responsibility to appoint another mediator within 7 days from the termination. And this provision allows the parties to retain control over the selection process of their mediator, ensuring that the replacement is mutually acceptable. In case of institutional mediation, the mediation service provider is responsible for appointing a new mediator from its panel within 7 days from the termination. This ensures a swift and efficient transition, leveraging the service provider's resources and panel of qualified mediators to maintain the momentum. The procedure for the replacement of mediator is designed to minimize the disruption in the mediation process, ensuring that a new mediator is appointed quickly, whether through the party agreement in non-institutional mediation or by the mediation process in an institutional mediation. This provision ensures the continuity and maintain the mediation process integrity and efficiency. The Chapter 4 of the Mediation Act, which outlined the provision for the establishment of a comprehensive framework for the appointment of mediators, addressing the potential conflict of interest and ensuring the continuity of the mediation process. Initially, the rule emphasized the party autonomy by allowing the mediator, that is, appointment of mediator of any nationality, provided that the foreign mediators should meet the specific qualification as may be denoted by means of rules. If the parties fail to agree on a mediator, a mediation process service provider steps in to appoint one from its panel within 7 days, ensuring the process is not stalled or not stopped. The service provider must also consider the suitability and preference of the parties, further emphasizing the importance of the fairness and parties' comfort with the appointed mediator. Further, the provision with respect to the conflict of interest, replacement of a mediator, and the termination of a mediator are crucial for maintaining the integrity and impartiality of a mediation process. And the mediators are required to disclose all the potential conflict before and during the process of mediation. This transparency allows the parties to have objection in writing or seek the replacement of a mediator if necessary. The termination and replacement process is well defined, wherein it ensures that the parties or the mediation process is continuous and which is essential for the parties and mediation service provider to handle transition smoothly and maintain the mediation process effectiveness. With this, we conclude the discussion on Chapter 4 of the Mediation Act 2023. Thank you.